Bedtime Stories from Sleep With Me. It's brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states or situations. Friends beyond the binary, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time. You know, there's a thing called floating. I've never done it before. It's definitely on my one day wish list. This is a story about a fish that floats sometimes. You know, I also heard from Sandra J. Bullock that hope floats. I've never seen, just like I've never seen hope floats. Watching hope floats while I float. But floating, you're supposed to be low on sensory stuff, right? So while I float, not the best time to watch hope floats. Was Sandra Bullock's character named Hope? Anyway, not important. You could let me know, though. I love it. Especially if you say it's a great film. But you say, sir, what are you even talking? I'm here to listen to a sleep podcast, and all I'm hearing is a bunch of nonsense. And I'd say you're correct on that one. But coming up here is a long, meandering intro. Coming up is Sleep With Me podcast. A podcast that's here to put you to sleep because you deserve a good night's sleep. It is, as part of my brain already said, does take some getting used to. It's a very different show. So give it a few tries. I'm here to keep you company while you drift off. Take your mind off of stuff. Be your friend in the deep, dark night because you deserve a good night's sleep. You deserve a place you could get some rest. So maybe I could keep you company and take your mind off whatever's keeping you awake. What'll happen here is we're going to have some support. That's how we're able to be free twice a week. Then there'll be a long, meandering intro, which is a big part of the podcast, a show within a show to ease you into bedtime. And then there'll be a nice crossover episode, bedtime story about a fish, giant friendly fish it's called. So that's it. It's time for Sleep With Me, the podcast that puts you to sleep. And these sponsors are how we're able to do it for you for free twice a week. All right, everybody. So this is episode 37 from the Quiet Journeys of Professor Atwood. I probably talked about it earlier, but you could always find this in your podcast app of choice. Or at whitecatentertainment.com. Let Professor Atwood take you on a journey and help you fall asleep. Each quiet journey is designed with a soundscape and a bedtime story to help you learn something before you go to sleep. And that comes with monthly updates. It comes out once a month. This is episode 37, kind of a reimagining of it. The big friendly fish in the Panama Canal. Hello, adventurers. I hope you're doing well and getting nice and comfortable. This evening, I'm going to tell you about my encounter with a giant friendly fish at the Panama Canal. It was turning out to be quite an adventure. As you know, I was taking my ship, the Recovery, and my crew through the Panama Canal, following a treasure map my friend and professional washboard player Benny sent me. And, you may have heard other, I'm not sure, was it Benny? My mind escapes me right now that I met in Alaska. But I know that people that listen to multiple episodes of Professor Atwood during the day for breaks will let me know. We were headed to Gardner Island, just off of New York. The interesting thing was that there was a section of the island on the treasure map, but not an actual map of the island. And that landmass discrepancy, that was a GNR album that never came out. It was supposed to come out after a spaghetti incident. Landmass discrepancy would have been a good one. Would be where we would begin our search for the mysterious treasure of Captain Kidd, with 2 Ds, remember. Now, things didn't go according to plan, and I can't say it was the first time. Honestly, plans when you're adventuring are more like guidelines. You know where you're going, but you always have to roll with the old, roll with the ship, as they say, roll with the waves. Or it may have been Steve Winwood who once said wisely, roll with it, baby, or just roll with it. But it might not have been Steve Winwood, and many of you may say, Steve Winwood, not familiar, which you say, okay, well, roll with it. Steve Winwood may need to roll with it then. There was that time Professor Tansky and I decided to take a vacation together in China, and that's when we found that there was a second Great Wall built just under the first. That was a time that unexpectedly Professor Tansky, they said they were running. They were trying to catch a balloon shaped like a puppy poo, and this balloon was caught in a downdraft. It was not a helium balloon, but it's a point of order, I guess. It was caught in a downdraft where they went down a friendly-looking tunnel, so well lit, and that did lead to the discovery of the second wall. And I also had to remind Professor Tansky, maybe walk next time or let us know. By the way, maybe don't chase every balloon you see. Anyway, it was smooth sailing on the Pacific Ocean as we were on our way, following the course Colin, our navigator, had charted. And things began to get complicated when we arrived at the Panama Canal. Now, you might be surprised to hear this, but we were waiting our turn. We got the VIP canal lane because Professor Perez from the Panama Canal Authority Special Projects Division radioed us. It was definitely a big concern, as while their name is the Panama Canal Authority Special Projects Division, I knew that was an interesting ruse, an interesting use of language, because projects actually was Panama Canal Authority Special Challenges and Growth Opportunities Division. Usually unexpected and unplanned challenges and growth opportunities division. And what a challenge and growth opportunity they had. A big friendly fish was going right down the middle of the Panama Canal, with a giant smile, a smile so wide that it was incredibly distracting. And I admit it, this growth opportunity and challenge seemed a bit out of my wheelhouse, but sometimes it's good to get outside of your comfort zone and say, well, let me help with this challenge involving a giant friendly fish. So anyway, back to what was the story. I had Captain Flynn bring us through through the initial canal locks and into the center of the Panama Canal. Professor Perez looked on nervously as we entered the center of the man-made Gatun Lake between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. And then we saw it. What could only be described, like my crew, first they were gasping, then some were giggling, some were chuckling. So many noises my crew was making. Is this giant, again, the title of the story is Giant Friendly Fish, in which when a fish is smiling in a non-metaphorical way, an actual smile that you could feel on the inside, you assume they're a friendly fish, and they're giant. And it was swimming around our ship, but other than smiling and occasionally making eye contact with someone, it seemed like it was mostly ignoring us. It was just swimming around the perimeter of the engineered lake between the locks. Now, Now, water was not very deep, and we were pretty close, so we had a pretty good view of it swimming around. And it was big. I mean, we're talking 80 feet long, fin to nose or whatever, fin to smile to rear, cheek to cheek. There's, I don't know, like, but it did, there's something else, though, because it just seemed to swim in a circle over and over again. Now, Professor Perez radioed the Panama Canal, growth opportunity team, and had them open the locks leading back to the Pacific Ocean, because that is where this big friendly fish had come from. And as soon as they were opened, this giant friendly fish, GFF. Could you have a GFF for a BFF? If you're a fish, for sure. If you're a giant fish, yeah, or we'll find out, right? Would you be my BFF, GFF? We're not there yet. But anyway, as soon as the locks were open, the giant friendly fish could have exited at any time. But it did something curious. It examined the opening for a moment, and then it ignored it and kept on swimming around the perimeter, as if it knew the open locks would lead it back to the Pacific Ocean, but it chose not to go. Very curious indeed. Professor Perez shrugged her shoulders and ordered the locks closed again. Now, the crew had lots of questions, and obviously Dolores, who was in charge of SSO, ship safety officer, ship shape and ship safety officer, once again asked about, are we 100% sure, just because we feel like the smile and the eye contact of this giant fish, and a sense of friendliness, are we sure this fish is friendly? And I said with confidence, I'm not sure, but I feel good. And that led us to our main problem. Okay, the fish was swimming around, ignoring us, ignoring a way back to the sea. And even when we tried, to show it, hey, we tried to show our ship, we went and started, anyway, I'm getting ahead of ourselves. It didn't seem to want to follow us, or even acknowledge, other than occasionally with eye contact only, that we were even there. We didn't know what to do. And I had to think for a moment. This wasn't an easy one to puzzle out. It wasn't like that time long ago when I was in that temple in the Amazon and I fell asleep and then I woke up and I wasn't sure where I was. I mean, sometimes that happens, just like in the movies, you step on something or you take something gold off a pedestal, and normally then you got to, move fast, wherever, if you're in a hurry. Now, that one time that happened when a scholar from my team interpreted some pictographs incorrectly and mistook lots of good stuff for impending trouble and growth opportunity challenges, but in an immediate way. And then they kind of got nervous, obviously, because they had a strong reaction to thinking, I don't know if I want this immediate growth opportunity. So thankfully, while they were caught up in that, and this was a time I assessed my team building, pre-adventure team building strategies. But what I did was I found a rotating wheel with ancient symbols, and I just had to rotate those, and then a hidden door opened, and we were off. Now, this was a bit more complicated than just figuring something out like that, like a clear problem to be solved. We had something we didn't understand. Things were kind of in a closed circuit, so to speak, with the big friendly fish in its own electrical loop, ignoring everything else. And there was only one way to approach this problem. The giant friendly fish continued to swim and swim and swim and swim and swim and swim and swim, swimming, swimming. And I realized that, okay, first I got caught. I said swimming, swam. It had swam earlier, then now it's swimming. It's on a swim. And, okay, I said, well, I have to communicate with this giant friendly fish if I want to get it. Now you say, what's the problem? This was a giant fish, and people said, like, because other ships are passing through. One, no one wants to bump a friendly fish. Two, the fish did take up a lot of space. And three, everyone that saw this friendly fish that wasn't on a specific task like we were, they mostly would be consumed with laughter and joy, and then they would just want to watch the fish. So that was what happened before we arrived, before our story even started. Okay, so I had to get in touch with this giant friendly fish, and that's not, easier said than done, because I have experience with some land animals, speak the universal pantomime language, old UPL. But sure, sea creatures, they're different. It might be a different situation. I've spoken to seahorses and emperor penguins, but a giant friendly fish, I don't know. Well, unfortunately, there was only one thing for it. I hesitated because, if I'm being honest, I knew that I was opening a can of worms if I went down this path I was thinking of, but I didn't see any alternative. And Bradley and the crew, they didn't have any other ideas and were looking to me to lead to a solution. Yeah, that's pressure, sure. But, you don't become a scientist or an adventurer if you're not looking. I mean, sometimes you do. If you're not looking for challenging growth opportunities or helping other people with them. I mean, you could become a scientist or an adventurer if you're not looking, but then you'd find your adventure, maybe through grant writing or something else. But me, I like the field work. And even when it gets challenging or what I may define as uncomfortable or unpleasant, but I also knew I would need help, and a specific kind of help there was also a time element because, no ships were passing through, cargo ships were backing up, and people were getting steamy, and making calls and saying, why am I waiting? And then people waiting for their, what are those things that the Jetsons worked on? Cogs and widgets, people were waiting for things to go through both sides of the Panama Canal, especially ship captains. And there was no answer. They said, at least give us a time frame or an answer, but the Panama Canal Authority was not able to do this. And they said, yeah, we'll give you some extra frequent passing through the canal points on your next trip, but that was not cutting it either. So I sighed, and I think Bradley suspected what I was thinking. I had to contact Professor Ryland, and I didn't relish the idea of contacting Professor Ryland, as I had there's no choice that I could think of other than that. Now, I may have forgot to mention this, or maybe I did, or maybe another time when we were talking, but Professor Ryland was into studying the intelligence and inner workings of the mind of giant fish. And they had attempted to create an electrocephalographic helmet to put on fish to further get a view of the inner workings of their mind. And this was a difficult process. In the past, it did not go well. It took 2 submarines, 3 boats, and my own ship to help them sort it out. Because you like the one, how do you get a fish to stop swimming? 2, do they know, hey, this is for the benefit of all fish. It's just you're not going to feel anything. 3, you also have the currents of the ocean, which tends to tangle things up. That is the main issue, tangled lines that are supposed to be transmitting information. And Professor Ryland was very disappointed and set their sights lower, or not lower, but in a different direction. They found a cooperative dolphin, not giant, though. Also, you see, technically that's a mammal, I believe, but that was published in numerous journals. But to this day, they say, that was a big miss, not being able to get giant fish to wear an electronic brainwave helmets. Now, for some reason, they took this very personally, because we talked about the feelings by using strawberry shortcake dolls, because sometimes it's easier to do that, talk through dolls. And I had said, Professor Ryland, how are you feeling? I'm, whatever, Tommy Blueberry, your strawberry shortcake. And I said, very disappointed. That's how I knew they were very disappointed. Strawberry shortcake, because in that case, what they had, we had found a giant, I had to create a whole story about that, where there was a giant strawberry and a giant strawberry bush, and, strawberry shortcake wanted to talk to the giant strawberry. Similar idea. And she got a horn. Oh, because it was across a giant, abyss. And so she used the horn to amplify her mouth or noises to talk to the giant strawberry and strawberry bush that was not accessible, but there was no response. So that's why strawberry shortcake was very disappointed. Okay, so there's go back to the technology. It's like recording like electrical activity, and that represents the activity like beneath the surface of the head of the fish. And, you're typically using sensors to do that, but it says, oh, this is fluctuating, or this is fluctuating, ionic currents, neurons, no currents. Though I could go with a salad with some currents right now. It's recording spontaneous electrical activity over a period of time. And, you could either focus on event-related potentials or contents, professional fluctuations in time locked to an event, like a stimulus onset or button press, or neural oscillations, or brainwaves, they call them, some do. And you could see those and observe them in frequency domain. Because, there's billions of neurons that are electrical, not to go on a scientific tangent, but these are electrically charged, polarized, if you will. There's also proteins pumping ions across things. Neurons are exchanging ions with extracellular, with other things. Some help maintain resting potential. Others propagate action potentials. And you may be familiar with magnetic, but also ions of similar charge repel each other, just like interpersonally with myself and some scientists and scholars. And when many ions are pushed out of many neurons at the same time, that also impacts their neighbors. And then that impacts their neighbors' neighbors, and so on. That creates a wave. This is known as volume conduction. And when a wave of ions reaches the sensors, the sensors have electrons in them, which are pushed or pulled, and that happens easily. And the push or pull of voltages between any two electrodes, it can be measured by a voltmeter. And recording these voltages over time, that is what we're going on. Electric potential generated by an individual neuron is far too small by individual one to be picked up. So it always reflects a summation of synchronous activity of thousands or millions of neurons of a similar spatial orientation. But as you can see, you got to be lined up. So if it doesn't have a similar spatial orientation, their ions do not line up and create waves and don't create waves to be detected. There's pyramidal neurons that are lined up in a pyramid structure. Those are well aligned and work together or fire together or activate together. Because voltage field gradients fall off with the square of distance, though, activity from deep sources is more difficult to detect than the currents near the skull. There could also be oscillations at a variety of frequencies. Several of these oscillations have characteristic frequency ranges. Spatial distributions are associated with different states of functioning, waking, sleeping. These oscillations represent synchronized activity over a network of neurons. The neuronal networks underlying some of these oscillations are understood. Thalamocortical resonance. That reminds me of thalamores, I believe. Back when I used to adventure but that was an adventure I used to have, still may have. 10 years old, I still play it when I need a little oblivion. Anyway, not that kind of oblivion, just an adventure with my scrolls of elders. Okay, where was I, though? Oh, you got oscillations, thermortical resonance, sleep spindles, posterior basic rhythm, and dreams about having, that's where it all comes from, maybe. And research that measures this stuff with spiking of neurons and the relationship between the two is complex. There's gamma bands in phase, delta bands, that measure the neuron spikes. And sometimes you use a gel or a paste, and you want to reduce impedance. So you may even try to clean everything off so you get a good signal. And again, that's where the wires come in, which is what gets tangled in the ocean due to the waves. There are systems that use caps or nets where the sensors are embedded. And this is common with high-density arrays. But in the ocean, this had to be different. And, of course, not all sea creatures are the same. So Professor Ryland tried to create a custom helmet with netting that was waterproof and comfortable for a dolphin and wireless. Now, regardless of the type of mammal that wears the helmet, the signals can be stored electronically, filtered for display. You may even use a high-pass filter to filter out slow artifacts like electrogalvanic signals, movement artifacts. This is like recording stuff. And the low-pass filter, which filters out high-frequency artifacts, like electromyographic signals. You could also use a notch filter. Now, something else we didn't have to worry about was we were in the middle of an engineered canal. Now, so I needed to tie this all together because there was researchers in University of California, Irvine, that had developed processing techniques to identify correlations of imagined speech and intended direction. They could be broadcast via, just by signals, like very similar to signals such as spoken words, and systems for decoding imagined speech. These are like a brain-to-computer interfaces. So that's why I needed Professor Ryland and their dolphin. And this new technology, with all these elements working in tandem, I believe we could communicate with the giant friendly fish if you followed everything I said. Now, if you did not, you did not. But we know, what could we do? So I explained the plan to the crew in a briefer way, but they listened to this recording too. But they still looked at me blankly, except for Bradley, of course, because he knew Professor Ryland, and despite the possible obstacles, Bradley was like, this might just work. Everyone then got to work with their assignments because there's lots of preparation. Now, I first got a hold of Professor Ryland out in the ocean, and Professor Ryland was in the Pacific Ocean just outside of Hawaii. We started talking about the helmet and what went wrong putting on a giant fish. And as familiar with our communications, I thought, said, let me tell you about a relatable situation I'm in right now. But Professor Ryland seemed melancholy about this. He said, oh, wait a second, this is another giant friendly fish. I don't think it's going to work. And the whole ocean is going to mock me. Now, the dolphin that Professor Ryland worked with, Phil, was with him, nudged him on the side of his boat. That cheered him up. It looks like Ryland and Phil developed a connection through brainwave helmets. So that was a positive sign. And Professor Hyland thumbed up, we'll help, but it'll take some time for us to get here, probably a week. And I said, that's too long. But I had another idea to get them there quicker. So my next call was to Gully, and we go way back on adventures and unexpected problem-solving opportunities. So they owed me a favor, and they worked with the researchers at UC Irvine. I said, we're going to need that equipment. We're also going to need it waterproof, and we're going to need it ASAP. I also need you to use some sort of high-speed travel and pick up Professor Ryland and the dolphin, Phil. And they hesitated because they knew that Professor Ryland liked to vent on travel trips and that they would have to hear that. And I said, well, but you said it, call you anytime. So they got a high-speed helicopter, and they said, we consider it done. They even got a water tank on the helicopter for Phil. And they said, how did you know about all this? And I said, I don't remember. It's just, maybe my son, the astronaut, mentioned it, or Wikipedia. Who knows? Okay, so that was all I could do in the immediate thing, but everything was in motion. And then Beverly, our chef, set out a lovely table for the crew. Ropa Vieja, which is delicious. It's shredded beef simmered in tomato, garlic, onion, cumin, and oregano, and served with rice and fried plantains. And, the person that makes sleep with me, would you believe it, they love Ropa Vieja. And they used to make it, but it turns out the people they used to make it for did not enjoy it. And so in an ultimate irony, they don't make it anymore. But Beverly also set an extra place for Professor Perez, who was staying with us on the ship until this giant friendly fish matter was resolved. And Dolores, the ship safety officer, said, I want to keep an eye on the behavior of the giant friendly fish, which was still swimming in circles and ignoring us. And then it was next morning that Gully arrived in the helicopter with Ryland and Phil. And that was quicker than I expected. Gully said they made some uplifts or upgrades to the helicopter, but it wasn't time for discussing that. Now, Gully was very affable, And it took a lot to surprise them, but seeing a giant friendly fish swimming around the Panama Canal did the trick. Professor Ryland, Gully, and Phil were all slack-jawed, then laughing, then elbowing one another at what they saw. I mean, when you're seeing a giant friendly fish swimming around and around and around, it gets your attention in a good way. But they also had helicoptered in, so they saw the impact of the backups. Now that everyone was here, I explained my plan. Professor Ryland would modify Phil's helmet, and then they would use the research communication speech processor. Then Phil would use this marine brainwave power to communicate with the giant friendly fish and figure out what's up. So essentially, Phil the dolphin was acting as a wordless translator for human to fish to dolphin to fish communication. So we started putting the plan in action. We had a good night's sleep the night before. So we put on a helmet on Phil, then upgraded the firmware and the software of remote receivers, powered those up. Then we also, at the same time, were getting Phil adjusted to, the water, easing Phil into the water of the Panama Canal through a series of pumps and stuff like that. And eventually Phil was fully in the Panama Canal and started swimming around in the general direction of the, and Phil had adjusted at this point to the fact that the fish was smiling. And you might say at this point, like, what's the difference between a fish that looks like it's smiling, but it's just its natural structure? And it would say, well, I don't want to reveal the actual, I said to the species of fish, their representative said, please don't share what species this giant fish is, because it's going to confuse people. And then when they look for us, they'll look for a smiling fish. No, this specific fish was smiling. It wasn't the natural state of the fish. Okay, so Phil was swimming towards the giant friendly fish. But again, the fish was ignoring everybody except for eye contact. And so looking at the dolphin and looking at us, and you say, how do you know? And I say, well, that was the interesting thing, that this fish would come partially out of the water. Yes, you're correct. Now, that was not unique to this friendly fish, but it was a type of fish that could break the surface, basically hold their breath when they're out of water. Because just to back up, like they would feed on surface plankton or surface something. I'm not sure if it's plankton, to be honest with you. But so that's part of its natural state of things. Maybe just kelp or something. So it would go up and it could swim and eat or look for something to eat. So its eyes and its mouth would be above the water. And then the fish kind of stopped swimming in circles and went towards Phil. And they seemed to pause and just swim together. And at first, I was surprised, but then it seemed like they were communicating. And everyone started cheering, and then we were on a delay, though. So the content was being relayed to Ryland at the receiver, translated, and sent to us. And we knew that this also, the game of telephone that children would play, that this would probably not be 100% accurate, but we would be able to get a general idea of what they were talking about. And we were able to get an idea of why the giant friendly fish was swimming around and around in circles where they were. And part of what stuck out is that Professor Ryland paused, unsure if this was correct translation. And Ryland said, Phil, let me just, can we rephrase this? Can I rephrase it to you? Can you rephrase it to the fish? A lot of rephrasing, reflective, active listening type stuff to verify things. Because also the funny thing is, dolphins are a bit of a trickster sometimes. So it turned out the fish's name was Cecil, and Cecil was in a swimming contest of all things, and we had no idea about this. And again, we have not been able to verify this except, so none of this may be true, but it is true. Also, when we spoke to the representatives of this species of fish, they said we don't communicate with humans. 1, and 2, we don't have swimming races or swimming competitions. But according to Cecil, they were on a competition. They're going from Hawaii to Cuba, and this is where it gets really interesting. Was that Cecil had found out, because Cecil is friendly and likes to make eye contact with all beings, but sometimes humans, Cecil had slowly learned about the Panama Canal from running across other ships. Because a lot of times they say, we got to go through the Panama Canal to get to the Atlantic, like in the gap of like a friendly fish not speaking to you, but smiling and making eye contact with you. After thousands and thousands of contacts, naturally, a large number of those contacts want to fill that air with something like a conversation. So Cecil said, wait a second, I can win the swimming competition by using the Panama Canal. And this was, according to Cecil, a tradition among the school of fish they hung with annually. All fish of this species of a certain generation swim from Pacific to Atlantic. They go all the way around South America, and they end up in the general region of Cuba. But Cecil, knowing about the Panama Canal, said, I'm going to use the Panama Canal. And this is why Cecil refused to use the lock that returned to the Pacific, because then they'd be in last place. Now, I don't want to weigh in on right or, wrong about this move, part of an ocean marathon. But we did have to figure out what we needed to do, because Cecil said, I need to use the canal at this point because I want to at least come get to, now that I've been delayed, I still could get there first, but even if I don't. But we said, well, I don't know if that's fair. What about the other fish? And then it started a whole debate, even in our heads. But there's something about Cecil. We said, oh, you're smiling. Are you smiling? And Cecil goes, no, I smile like this. I love life, man. So, yeah, I'm laughing either way. Even if you force me to come in last, I'll still smile. But, that's what we're like. So there's just a big debate about whose business is this? What about all the other ships in the canal? And then also, sensibly, if we allow this now, what about all the other fish, giant fish, friendly or not? If we let one friendly fish through the canal and they talk about it, or any other these other giant fish hear about the canal, it'll disrupt canal traffic. And so it was like, okay. And we said, how many marathons? And what about other fish that have marathons? The thing was, the debate went on so long, and all the things went on so long, because of satellites, we checked things, and we also did calculations, about speed of giant fish of this size, when it started, and we said, you've been in the canal so long that if we send you towards the Atlantic, you'll be behind. And we wanted to make sure, can we get this information to Cecil so Cecil understands? And Cecil did understand things and said, hey, can we just keep this to ourselves? Don't tell any other giant fish about this then. I won't tell anybody about the existence of this canal. And if they bring it up, I'll say, oh, no, we're not allowed in there. And I could even explain to them that fact when I come in last. And we said, okay, we won't tell anybody that you tried to, fudge the rules on your marathon. And even Phil said, don't worry about it. And so then we said, okay, we got to get everything ready. Phil got back in Phil's tank and got in the helicopter. And we called for the lock to open. And Cecil said, okay, well, I'll try to catch up. Either way, I'm still I'm happy this happened. What a growth opportunity. And I never, now I know how to talk to, I know I got to talk to Phil and through Phil, all of you. And Professor Ryland, of course, was blown away because this was their dream. What a growth opportunity for Professor Ryland, communicating with a giant friendly fish. They had done it in some sense and felt, well, I'm vindicated. It was just that there had to be a wireless transmitter. And they said, I look forward to seeing you at the next mixer. And I said, thanks for your help, and Phil. And we're so glad that this gave, this was a growth opportunity for so many. I thanked Gully. Said, now we're even. Gully said, I don't keep score. Call me when you need me. I'll drop Ryland and Phil off. So the canal was clear at this point, and Professor Perez asked us if there was anything we could do to repay us for our help in solving this growth opportunity challenge. And I said, actually, we need a helicopter. Ours is being fixed, and we have a helipad on our ship without a helicopter. It just doesn't, it throws everything off. Plus, we like to have it, to scout stuff and get stuff done, pick up snacks. So they said, no problem, we'll loan you a helicopter. So then the lock opened for us, and we were on our way into the Atlantic towards Gardner Island, and it seemed like smooth sailing. And I could tell you about that another time. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about, growth opportunities before we close. Sometimes we consider ourselves stuck. But if we look at it another way, it's not that you're stuck. It's that this is a problem solving or growth opportunity that you feel stuck about. So your job really isn't just that to be stuck. It's to help unstick things. So the problem can move on, just like we did with Cecil. Maybe having a little detachment from, the things to say, okay, how would I help Cecil with this growth opportunity? Then you don't feel as tethered to what we're calling a problem or a growth opportunity, where you just are focused on that part of it and not what's past it, the other side of the opportunity. I mean, we've all been there. And it's hard not to take it personally, but there is a chance to do that sometimes. To let it go and watch it depart and swim out to the sea and say, the fish was never stuck. It was just waiting for the other gate to open. And even though that gate didn't open, that fish was still friendly. So once you found something, find a way to help it. Sometimes that's easier than you think. All you have to do is open your locks and let it go. If only, But imagine it drifting away on its way, smiling through the sea. You're happier for meeting the giant friendly fish, and they're happier for meeting you. Swimming on and on and on. Good night, adventurers. Scoots, I want to thank a couple of patrons that wrote testimonials about being a patron. Pete from Australia, I mentioned before, I knew the podcast was for me when you talked about how listeners deserve a good night's sleep, and you're here to help. I also struggle with depression, anxiety, and just make me feel like I'm worthy, come across as a lovely person. I do get lonely at night. I'm single. You're a nice person to listen to. You say some funny things, too. Thanks, Pete. That's Aussie Pete. And then Savannah from Boothby, Maine. Been listening to Sleep With Me on and off for 5 years, having discovered it while studying abroad for 6 months. During that time, my struggle with anxiety and homesickness made bedtime very difficult. Sleep With Me was finally a solution for sleep that works for me. The podcast is a tool that I have at my fingertips for those nights that I toss and turn. Scooter's work and companionship is invaluable, which is why I'm happy to support him and the podcast. So thanks, Pete. Thanks, Savannah, for supporting the show. Sleep With Me is here for free because the people that support the show directly or support our sponsors. So that's why I kind of focus on celebrating those people that do that, because I really appreciate it. You could support the show for free, too, by spreading the word about Sleep With Me or podcasting, just letting people know, hey, this is what a podcast app is. This, if you want me to show you how it works, soft sell type thing. Helps everybody. So that's it. And then we got some Tuck You In sponsors after this sometimes. That was what really helped us grow the archives over the past couple of years. So, yeah, thanks so much and good night.